And then we started walking back the way we came from. Now, when Jesus was swinging me around, that's when I saw his face. That's when I saw his face. And I felt bold enough to look at his face and to admire his beauty. And as we got to the end of the beach, well, where we began, at the beginning of the beach, there were the saints: Abraham, Moses, Jacob, Isaac, Elijah, Mother Mary. Everybody's heads were bowed in prayer. And Mother Mary was the only one that raised her head, and she looked directly at me and smiled and said that her message to the world was and is: God always answers the prayer of a mother. I could not feel sadness. And that's when I realized that it is impossible to feel fear, sadness, grief, loneliness. Those words do not apply in heaven. They do not apply in the presence of Jesus. It just doesn't.
My guest today is Debbie Ali, who had a near-death experience as a result of being kidnapped, held for ransom. So this is a little bit more graphic than some of the other NDEs, but we've decided that we're going to really focus on her near-death experience and all of the questions that we have after somebody explains in detail what they've experienced on the other side. But this is going to be an interview that you don't want to miss because she had an incredible experience with God and Jesus. So Debbie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Laurie. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. You know, it's interesting. Somebody told me a couple days ago that only 7% of all NDE experiencers have an experience with Jesus. So I think it's a little bit less frequent that I've had conversations with people who've had an encounter with that. I'm hearing a little bit more that people are having encounters with Christ consciousness, which is interesting. So I'm really excited to dive in deep and have this conversation with you today.
My pleasure. I have not done my research in terms of the statistics that you just quoted, but you might be right. I'm not entirely sure. My experience was um very much Christ related, and before this even occurred, it was actually on my 31st birthday that this happened.
So
Yes, on my
crazy.
birthday.
So crazy.
I know.
Can you even celebrate your birthday now?
For a long time I couldn't, for a very
I
long
bet
time,
you
but
couldn't.
now I do. Now I
Good.
do. Not in a I've never been an extravagant person in terms of celebrating my birthday or anything, but now I kind of make it special for me in a more personal way. Like I do something for myself,
That's
some
wonderful.
little thing, but I try as much as possible to let it be just an ordinary day. Um, my kids don't agree usually, but they want to do stuff and all that, which is their way of trying to, get my headspace elsewhere. But it can still be trying at times. I will not
Yeah,
lie.
I can imagine.
That
Well,
kind of
why don't
trauma
you
didn't
share
go
a little
away.
bit about what your life was like before your near-death experience?
Oh, well, before I was already married. I had my two kids. They were very young, 8 and 6 years old, respectively. And my life was pretty simple, kind of dull, but I grew up in a very conservative Presbyterian home, school, um, then back home, church-related activities, and then back home. There was no partying or, you know, traveling and nothing like that. I led a very simple, quiet life. Met my husband at a young age, got married at a young age, got pregnant at a young age. And yeah, and I was a teacher at the time. But I've always been a writer. I've been writing since I was 16 years old, started teaching when I was 18 years old. So my life was rather simple, with the exception of my spiritual calling. Throughout my teens, I've always had what's the right phrase? There's always been I've always been led to elevate myself in terms of my spiritual awareness. Let me put it that way. And I've always been heavily involved in matters of the church and matters of prayer and so on, and counseling even at such a young age. Um, and while I had always been very devoted to Christ, um, I was never really taught in depth about the nature of my faith. And I was never encouraged to ask questions. And even when I did, the responses I received were very, very vague. So I took that with me. But the one thing that I can say is I knew that I loved Jesus beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'd follow him anywhere. I would go to any lengths for him. That I was sure about. And without really understanding what that meant and what that could imply. However, like I said, on my 31st birthday, that's when the horrific experience began that led to my death experience. Now, my book, Bare Feet, has all of the gory details of the encounter, which lasted for 14 days and 14 nights. So during that time, I was everything horrible that you can think that you would think would happen to an individual, especially a woman, did occur. So everything from beatings to verbal, I mean, incredibly insultive language. These men were twice my size, the abductors. I'm just like 5 feet on the dot. So pretty tiny compared to 6 foot plus men, built, strong, on top of which they were armed. So there was very little I could have done in terms of, fighting or retaliating in any way. Not that I did not try, because I did. Of course, the only response was further beatings and further choking and punches. And when I say punches, I mean like, a man's hand, like twice the size of my palm, just like, all over my body, and kicks with steel tip boots and so on. And all of this was partly to subdue me, but also to obtain information about our finances. Whatever gave these people the impression that we were wealthy, I do not know, but we certainly were not. Still, we are not. Um, but they are wired differently. Their way of thinking is totally askew to what we normal people um, would classify ourselves as. And yeah, they came in. Fortunately, my children were not at home at the time. Otherwise, it would have been an entirely different scenario because I'm a lioness when it comes to my babies. As old as they are now, I'm the same way. But so yeah, they came in, they robbed the house, took me along with them. I was praying, okay, please just let this be a robbery. Like lift the whole house, take everything. I don't care. Just leave me alone. Right? But that was not to be. So the first night, which was my birthday night, um, I was dropped into a hole in the ground, a ditch. So it was a makeshift dumping ground for that particular community, which was very well known, still is, I believe, very well known for criminal activity, gangs, gang warfare, that sort of thing. And I spent my birthday in the rain, um, blindfolded, tie straps on my feet, tie straps on my hands. Essentially, I saw no light for 14 days and 14 nights. No light. Um, Later that night, I was moved to another location where I was sexually assaulted the first time, and negotiations had begun for the ransom. Um, which obviously was not going according to their plan because they wanted X number of millions of dollars, which we definitely did not have, not even in worth, not even in equity. Um, so according to them, we did not agree to pay them their money. They were very much entitled to our earnings. But that's a whole other story. In any event, that first assault was beyond horrific. Having been raised such a conservative way, married my first boyfriend. Immediately after had, was got pregnant. 9 months later, I had my son. It was just, I had no experience of with the dark side of humanity. And in many ways, I believe that's why God allowed me or allowed this horrible thing to happen. Because how else am I supposed to understand and help someone who thinks the way that they do unless I understand or I have some sort of insight into their way of life? And that's something that many people find controversial. They feel like it's, how can God allow that, etc., etc. But would I be fulfilling my purpose now had I not experienced that? No. My life probably would have gone on just the way it was. Um, I won't say meaningless, but not as full or rich with meaning that is present now. In any event, after that assault, I was, I mean, I cried for 4 days, like nonstop. I cried and sobbed when there were no tears. And yes, that is possible. It's, I was left numb, numb with pain, numb with trauma, numb with waiting to die. Because as far as I was concerned, there was no way I'm going to survive this because we don't have that money for a ransom. So they are going to kill me. It was simply a matter of when and how. So I spent agonizing. I mean, believe me, I would have taken many more beatings, physical beatings, above that mental torture of thinking, I'm not going to see my babies anymore. I'm not going to smell them anymore. I'm not going to be able to, play games and puzzles because I spent a lot of time with my kids. I did a lot of stuff with them. I'm not going to see them smile or grow up and achieve their dreams or, whatever. Things like that, simple things that we all take for granted. I suddenly realized I'm not going to see that. I'm not going to be there for any of that. And waiting to die is like, okay, what are they going to do? Is it going to be a bullet? Is that the way they do it? Or are they going to strangle me? Are they going to like, I'm just playing around with all of these horrific ideas of how they were going to get rid of me. And um, it was unreal, that kind of torture. One of the things that really got to me was after that first rape. People don't like to hear that word. They put the asterisk in the middle, replacing the A, but you know what? It kind of ticks me off because at the end of the day, while it might be triggering to some, that is what it is. And trying to disguise the word does not remove the horror of what it really is. And that's why I started speaking out so quickly after I was released because I felt like people needed to know that when you're abducted, you're not put in an air-conditioned room and fed 3 meals a day and you have your own private bathroom and they treat you like you're garbage, like you're trash. And that's what I was. I was trash. The only value I held to them was the hope that I would be exchanged for money. That was the be all and end all of my value. But, coming from such a simple life, I was simply not, I was not processing that this was actually happening to me. Me being assaulted? No, not Debbie. Debbie's not being, it was an out of body experience. I was looking at somebody who looked like me. She looked a lot like me, but that was not me. No, 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 no. God would not allow that to happen to me. What did I do to deserve that? Guess what? Nobody does anything to deserve that. But in any event, after that was done, I remember the rapist looking at me and saying, "Happy birthday." That was my present that he had promised earlier on. He said he had a present for my birthday. I was not even remotely thinking I'm not processing anything. And then this happens, and then he wishes me happy birthday, and that ruined it for me. That ruined everything. But to hear him say that it was just like it was like an axe in my stomach, you know. But in any event, later on that night, I was moved again to another location, and that's where remained for the subsequent 13 days and nights. So again, no light, nothing. I was duct taped. There was duct tape around my mask just to ensure that I would not remove it to look at my location or who was holding me hostage and all of that. So there I was badly beaten. And this guy was like in my book, I describe him as a beast, like massive, like, chunky. It's like comparing a pit bull, a mastiff pit bull to a chihuahua. That was like the difference in size, you know. He was a beast. He just dragged me out of the car, of the vehicle with his arms around my neck and just dragged me out like that and held me up by my throat with his hand. He was that strong. And I was that petite, and he pulled me inside like that and he said, "You make a sound, I'll break your neck." End of story. Of course, I'm choking, I'm barely conscious. So there's no, for the first 3 days, I would say, I was in and out of consciousness between the beatings, the starvation, the dehydration, the sexual assaults. I was just, I was in and out. Um, so I was tortured there for information. I said what I could, whatever I could, my brain could muster. I said, which was the truth. We had no money. Um, and yeah, and then he pulled me into this room, handcuffed me to some makeshift kind of mattress bed type thing, and I was handcuffed to on my right side to a bedpost. And that's where I remained. And I was assaulted 2 other times in quick succession. Once because the keeper, as I referred to him, was under the impression that I was messing with the mask and I was trying to remove it, which I wasn't. I was simply trying to widen the holes, next to my nostrils so I could breathe a little bit better. And his response to that was rape. And I fought with every, ounce of strength that I had in me. Strength I didn't even know I possessed. I fought. No avail. I was constantly being choked and slapped and kicked. So that was that. And the other time was because I said that I was cold, which it was chilly. It was chilly getting to the morning period, and I just said that I was cold. And his response was, "Well, I will warm you up." Fought into unconsciousness and back. And I did go into shock at least 3 times because I remember just kind of drifting and then just shaking and then not remembering anything and then being awakened by this same guy. And his job was to keep me alive until money could be paid. And yeah, so the first 3, 4 days, that was it. I could not ingest anything. Of course, they were trying to feed me get me to drink some water, have some snacks or crackers or food or anything that nothing would stay down. I would just kept throwing up, which enraged them. They could not understand why I could not eat. Who can eat in such a situation? I don't know. But in any event, uh, long story short, I was in sheer torture for that duration, mentally and physically, but more so mentally because I questioned God. I was mad. I was mad. What did I do? I went to church. Church, I never had a boyfriend. All my activities, the way I led my life, everything was like, I examined everything. And I couldn't figure out what it was I did to deserve that. Of course, in hindsight, I realized that was not what it was about. Um, but at the time, that's the natural thought process. Nothing made sense. Eventually, I gave up. After a few days of battling with God out loud and in my head, I decided, you know what? Okay, you want to take me away from my children, who I would live and die for, give anything for? No problem. You want me to die in this horrible way? Okay, no problem. But I will not curse you. I will not say you are evil. I will not go against your will and your word. If this is the way you want it to be, no problem. It's not like I was in control of anything. I didn't even know what was happening on the other side. I didn't know what was being said, what was happening in my home, my children, my parents. I knew nothing. So who was I going to argue with? What was I supposed to do? I gave up. And when I surrendered, and I always use the word surrendered because I intentionally gave over that situation to God. And as soon as I did it, Lori, and I did that sometime late in the evening one day, the next day, this beast was like a baby. He was like a lamb. He started speaking to me softly and gently and quietly. His interest in my health, he was bringing me painkillers. He was, spoon feeding me water and little bits of sandwiches and stuff, just so I would, and at first I thought, okay, he's doing what he has to do. He's trying to keep me alive. But he was too gentle to just be trying to keep me alive. And I realized that God had shut the mouth of the lion. And I always refer to Daniel in the lion's den, right? The Lord put me in a lion's den to be mauled and killed and mutilated. But because I trusted him, he shut the mouths of the lions, just like he did this man. And he became very humble and very caring, which at first I did not trust, but I knew that I trusted in Christ. And this is where something supernatural took over. I was me, I continued to be me, but everything that I said and everything that I did and the way that I reacted and the, it was not me, it was Christ in me. It's like I could hear myself saying things and I couldn't believe that I was saying them. Like when the keeper eventually he asked for forgiveness for what he had done because he was very, very curious about religion and he would overhear me praying. I'd be praying out loud, whispering, but he would be listening and be like, "Why are you, who's this Jesus? And what are you talking about? Look at the situation you're in, and you're talking to Jesus. He can't see you. You can't see him. None of this is real. What are you, crazy?" And he starts asking all of these questions about my faith, and gradually I started teaching him what I knew, teaching him about love. And it occurred to me because he started telling me about his life. Now, the manner in which he grew up in a gang related community. That's all he knew. That's all he saw day, night. He was told if you don't have something, steal it, and you'll have it. That's what he was taught as a little boy. So how could I blame him for becoming what he did? Becoming the way he was. And he told me he was a stone cold murderer. He told me how many people he killed and how he killed them and that kind of stuff. And but when I heard his story, I realized, maybe if I grew up that way, maybe if I was raised that way, I might have turned out the same. I don't know. All I've ever seen was the other side of life. I've never seen this side. And I let him know that, okay, I'm not condoning what you did. I'm not agreeing that the way you think and what you believe is correct. I'm not saying that I like what you did to me. But when he begged for forgiveness, I did truly, truly forgive him. And it was like I was hearing myself forgiving him and not quite believing it. But again, it wasn't me. It was not me. It was all him. It was all Jesus. I forgave him and he cried. This stone cold murderer cried, held my hand, and tried to understand how I could forgive someone like him who had brutalized me, which he did. I mean, I was bleeding. I was wounded everywhere. I was in a terrible state. And eventually, he actually tried to allow me to escape. He untied me, everything. I was free. He said, "You just sit there and give me a few minutes." And he was gonna clear away whatever that meant, from where I was being held. He was gonna clear away, and he said, "Just give me a few minutes and then just run, and you'll find help." And I'm sitting there and I'm free to go, and I could not move. I would not move. And I'm thinking, okay, this is a trick. Has to be a trick. Maybe he's waiting out there to catch me and kill me or something. I don't know. And this was the Debbie thinking. This wasn't Christ thinking. And as clear as you are hearing my voice right now, I heard God's voice say, "Do not move." And I'm like, why, Lord? And I'm having these conversations, and a lot of people say, "Oh, she was hallucinating. She was, the trauma and all of that." But I knew what I heard, and it's the same voice I heard after the experience as well. And the Lord said, "If you leave, the people he's working with will kill him." A logical thinking person would say, "Who cares? Look at what he's done." And the Lord asked me, "Are you willing to have his blood on your hands?" I'm like, "No, I don't want anybody's blood on my hands." He says, "Well, then stay." And I stayed. And the guy came back and he was furious. He was mad. He said, "I cleared the way, whatever that meant." He said, "I cleared everybody. You could just, why didn't you?" And I told him, and he said, "Why would you care if they killed me? I deserve to die." And I said, "Yeah, but Jesus did not come here to condemn and to point fingers. He came here to save and to teach us the right way." He could not wrap his head around that. He just couldn't. And I had to beg him almost to handcuff me back to the bedpost. Because I told him, I said, "Listen, if the other people come in here and they see that I'm free, then we're both going to be dead." So grudgingly, he agreed, and he snapped on the handcuffs, but very, very loosely. And he referred to me as his friend, the friend that he never had growing up. And he said if I was his friend growing up, he would not have turned out the way that he did. And all of these men that he works with and does, whatever stuff they do, he said nobody ever cared to ask him about his life. How he felt. I was the first one. And he said because he considers me a friend, he would not allow anyone to hurt me. He would not allow anyone to kill me. According to him, they would have to kill him first. And he guaranteed me that I will return to my babies somehow. Not that I truly believed that at the time, but he did mean it. He was sincere. Um, several ransom attempts, attempts to drop off the ransom money. They failed for different reasons, and I had given up hope. I was like, after the third attempt, okay, this is just not going to happen. And then that in itself was a miracle because when kidnappers, they will keep their hostage maximum 5, 6 days. They'll keep them alive. If no money is exchanged, they've now become worthless. And that's when they dispose of them. For whatever reason, these people kept me alive for 2 weeks. And it was not as though they were going to get the sum of money that they asked for. They knew they were not going to get it. Why would you keep me alive? So the police, even the police, they couldn't grasp that. Why keep me alive and not get the money? Um, that was a miracle. So my file had moved from anti-kidnapping to homicide. They were searching for a body. They were searching for my body after 5 days. Of course, I didn't know that until after the fact. Um, in any event, I was drained. I was thoroughly, thoroughly drained, mentally, physically. I could not support this human body anymore. And so 2 days before I was eventually released, I just kind of gave up. And I felt like, okay, I'm drifting into a sleep. That's what death was like to me. I was drifting off, and just like that, I'm above me, and I'm looking at me, and I know it's me. I'm seeing the mask, I'm seeing the clothes, I'm seeing the bed, I'm seeing the handcuffs, the room, the contents of it. I'm seeing everything, and I'm like, what the hell? How can I be here, and how can I be there? And and I went down. I looked at myself. I saw the mask. I looked, I put my fingers here. There was no breath. I checked my chest. There was no movement in my chest. And I'm like, oh shit. You this is it. I'm dead. But it was not like a panicked, oh, I'm dead, or anxiety. There was none of that. There was just indescribable. I mean, I tried my best to describe it in my book, but really, there are no words. As you know, there are no words. It's just indescribable peace. No pain. I felt like my best self. Perfect in form, in thought, everything. And I just looked around and I said, I'm dead. And before I could even finish that thought, there's this brilliant white light. Brilliant is just one of the words I use to describe something that is beyond description. White light just on next to me, and out of that light, and I mean, I could look directly at it, looking directly at it. It doesn't hurt my eyes, nothing. It's just like I'm looking at you right now. And out of that light steps Jesus. He just walks towards me. And there on out, there was no conversation. There was communication, but there was no need for us to speak out loud. Everything was telepathic. I thought it, he responded. He said something, I responded, but it was all telepathic. And it was not as though I lost the ability to speak. There was just no need for it. There was no need to. So he walks towards me, and immediately there's this knowing, this is Jesus. This is Jesus I've loved and remained faithful to all of my life. And I just draw, I really, really wanted to look at his face and like ask a bunch of questions and like do everything all at once. But I was so overwhelmed with his presence, his aura, his love, his gentleness. I dropped to the ground. There was no ground, but I dropped to his feet and I just looked at his feet and marveled at his toes and the light coming from his toes and the toenails. And I could have stayed there, Laurie, and I would happily go back I always say this, I always say this. I would happily go back and look at Jesus's big toe for the rest of my life and remain right there. And I would be perfectly content and perfectly occupied in marveling every single cell of his toe. That's the awesomeness of what awaits. And he lifted me up and hugged me. And that's a feeling that I live off of. It's like food to me. If I do not relive that every so often, I think I would fall apart. I need that reminder of being held by him to get through this life. He held me and he said, "It's okay. No need to worry. It's all over. You can rest now." And before I can think or I could blink, I'm in his arms, cradled like a newborn baby. And I'm snuggling on him just like a baby would, on a baby would on his its mommy. And I'm snuggling on him and he said, "You can rest now." And he's like, "You can rest," like that. And I just snuggled and man, I slept. What I refer to as the sweetest sleep ever. And when I awoke, I was on this beach. Now, I grew up on a tropical island, so there are like beaches everywhere. So it was one of my favorite places to be. Sound of the waves, the fresh, salty air, the sunlight, the warmth, the vibrancy of it. And I have this thing with water. I don't know, I have this connection with water that's very odd because as much as I love it, I'm terrified of it. Like I won't go in beyond maybe my knee. That's max the knee. And then I'd start backing away. But I have this love for water, this need to be in water all the time. But, obviously that's not practical in Canada. So, um, uh, I woke up and I was on his shoulder like this. And I'm looking over his shoulder and I'm marveling at what's before me, which again is beyond description. And it's so frustrating as a writer to try to have to try to describe this. There are no words. You know, I combed every thesaurus possible. Like, it's got to be a word. There's no word. There are no combination of words. But I just looked back and I saw the sand just glistening behind him. And there were no footprints. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, but he's walking, but there are no prints. And here is his response to me telepathically again is well, there are no footprints because you're not supposed to go back. And I tried to feel sad. I tried, I actually tried to be troubled by that thought of not going back because my babies were waiting. My husband was there, my mom, my dad, my brother. I could not feel sadness. And that's when I realized that it is impossible to feel fear, sadness, grief, loneliness. Those words do not apply in heaven. They do not apply in the presence of Jesus. It just doesn't. And he put me down on the sand, and you'd swear I'd never seen a beach before. You'd swear I'd never been on sand before. I was all wiggling my toes and trying to dig a hole in it, and you'd swear that was the first time. And it was. It really was, because there was no sand like that I'd ever felt. Wet sand is clumpy. We all know damp, yes, but very clumpy and squishy. But the sand was wet, but you could separate each crystal from the other. And I remember bending down and looking at this grains of sand and thinking, oh my gosh, they're beautiful. And I'm looking at this, and I could discern every single grain of sand on my fingertip. That was what my eyesight was like. So I'm holding this little clump of sand, but I could see every single crystal and every single one was different. And I could see the difference in the dimensions of each crystal of sand, of a grain of sand. And Lori, I could have stayed there and just admired all of the trillions of grains of sand in just that little patch. And I would have been really content because it was so new and fabulous and interesting. And, that's when I raised and I saw the water. Oh, man, I tell you, I'm not an artist. Best I can do is a stick guy or stick girl. That's the best. Don't even ask the kids that I teach. I'm trying to draw some the dogs look like cows, look like sheep, look like people, look like everything. But I tried to find those shades of blue. I bought all kinds of paints, thinking, okay, if I just threw them all together, I'd get that. I cannot and have not yet found that blue that I saw in the ocean. And there are different shades of it. It was just, and the thing was, I looked, and you know what was funny to me? It was those of you who have children. When your child experiences something for the first time, whether it's a beach or anything, and you see the joy and the excitement on their faces, it's like you're living it all over again. Jesus was standing there looking at me with the sand and the water and the awesomeness of where I was. And it's like he was enjoying it. He was laughing and he was just kind of reveling in my excitement of it, about everything. So it's like he was like there, like, look at her with that, look at her with that. And I saw the water. Oh my gosh. I was able to look into the water. And I saw all of the fish, different types, different colors, different sizes, shapes, you name it. I saw them all. They were looking at me. I looked at them. I could see they're down to their skeletons. I could see all the rocks and the grasses and the seaweeds and the whatever else was there. I saw everything and it was way off. That was my eye. That was my sight. And I saw the horizon, dead straight line. But the thing was, as Jesus walked, the water would stop movement. The little tiny ripples that were coming up, the water itself would stop where he stood, and the fish would stop moving where he stood. Even the grasses and the seaweed would stop their movement. They would be like this, they just stop dead straight. And as Jesus walked, then they would resume movement. And in my, I'm questioning in my mind, but this is odd. There's always supposed to be movement in the water. And Jesus' response was, everything must stop and pay homage to me. And I knew, I knew, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, every knee shall bow. Even the fish of the sea, the water, everything must obey him. And he continued walking slowly, and I'm walking slowly, and I'm just admiring everything. The trees that were there never have found, never will find that kind of green, that shade of green, the richness of it. And I looked at this sky, and I said, this is odd. Why are there no clouds in the sky? And then Jesus' response, of course, was because there is no cloud, there is no sky. And I looked again, and I'm like, wait a minute. There really is no sky. It was like I could see so much further out into the universe itself. And the Lord said He said, you're free to go and travel as far as you wish. There's no limit to how high you can go. And there are no need for clouds. There is no need for them. We don't need rain. We don't need rain here in heaven. Why do we need clouds? And I'm thinking, oh, there's no rain, there's no clouds. So then in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so then where's the sun in all of this? And I realized there's no sun. So where is all this light coming from? And then Jesus's response was, there's no need for the sun. The light you see is the light of God that shines on everything and gives everything life. And then I started to really examine the rocks, the trees, the leaves on the trees, and there were no shadows. There was light all around the rocks. There was no shadow under the leaves. Everything was encompassed with the light of God. And I was like, wow, you know, we continued walking, and a thought crossed my mind about my children. Now, mind you, I said a thought crossed my mind. I was not dwelling on, oh my God, I'm not going to see my kids. Or, oh, I wonder, there was nothing like that. There was no sadness or grief in it. It was a thought. And Jesus said, you want to go back to your children? And thought a second, and I said, yes, I would really like to go back to them. And I kick myself all the time. All the time. Like, damn, you should have stayed. Why'd you? Dumb, 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 stupid. Should have stayed there. Why did I come back to this hellhole? When I mean hellhole, life, this life. But, when you're there, you feel so empowered. You're so alive, and you're so full of life and strength and vitality and everything that goes with it. You feel invincible. So then it's like coming back is a breeze. But then when you get back, you're like, oh my God, did I really? And when I said yes, he said, so does that mean that you don't trust me with your children? And I really had to think about it. I thought about it for a few seconds, and then I told him, I said, yes, I do trust you. There's no one else who would. He asked me if there was anyone else who would love them more than him. And I was like, no, I trust you, Lord. I put them in your hands. And I did. I really did let them go. Fully and completely trusting that he would take care of them, good, bad, or indifferent. It was like I suddenly had this understanding of, well, this is the way life goes. And even if I'm there with them, there are some things I'm not going to be able to save them from anyway. So I may as well entrust them to you. They have their path. And I did. I let them go. And I think because I let them go, God gave them back to me. Because when we got to the end of the beach, oh, I forgot to mention the breeze. There was a light, gentle, crispy air. And I'm just thinking, it's the breeze that you normally feel on the beach, but it wasn't normal. There was something about it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And of course, Jesus knew what I was thinking, and he said, that breeze that you feel is the breath of God. And the breath of God that gives and preserves life. And it will breathe new life into everything. And I realized, oh, that's where it's coming from. Because it was not as though it was blowing in one direction, because the wind changes direction on the beaches, but it was coming at me from all directions all at the same time. But it wasn't like foofing my hair into one way, like if it's blowing this way, your hair goes this way. It was just everywhere all at once. But my hair was just like this, which was weird. But we got to the end of the beach, and there was this even more brilliant light that again I could look directly into without squinting. And the voice of God, I heard a voice that was distinctly different from Jesus's voice. And he asked me, I say he for ease of reference. But in that moment, I knew it was not just he, it was he and she in one. And he asked me, um, do you really want to go back to your children? And I said, yes, Lord, yes, I do. I want to go back to my kids. And he said, okay, I'll let you go back, but you've got to do this, 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 and this for me. Do you agree? And there is this list of stuff, right? And I just, I looked at the list, and I knew that it was a tangible, visible list. I looked at it and I agreed. And essentially, it was continuing the work of God on earth, blessing people, helping people as much as I could. Something I did since I was a child, but I'm continuing it now on a higher level. And the first thing on that list was this book called Bare Feet. And this book appears before me. I see the cover, the title, the font style, the way the colors blended, the images, every single thing. And many people have said, Debbie, change the cover, make it something more, I don't know, vibrant, more eye-catchy. And I was like, nope, that's what he showed me. That's what I'm going to stick with. I don't care what you say. And, I agreed to the list and he said, okay, you can go back to your children. And he said his message to the world was this, that I see all, I hear all, I know all that happens in the darkness and in the light, and I save. And that's written at the beginning and end of my book. I say that at the beginning, usually at the end of every interview I do, I say that. That's his message to the world. It's a message of hope and peace. Because if you really, really know that, there is no worry, there is no fear. And then his light disappeared. And Jesus was so, so, so happy. Oh my goodness. He picked me up. He's very, very much like us. A crazy sense of humor. Always laughing and jolly and cryptic and sarcastic if he wants to be. And, he's just so real. And I remember him swinging me around and kissing me all over my head. And he said, I'm so glad. I'm so happy. He said, it's not going to be easy. He did warn me. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it. Everything will be okay. And he placed his hand on my head, and there was this intense heat that permeated every cell, every strand of hair on my body to under my feet. And it was intense to the point where it could have been unbearable, but for some reason it was very bearable. I don't know how else to explain it, but I knew he was blessing me, but he was also cleansing me of whatever diseases I would have contracted from these men. And as I later learned, having been held for 2 weeks by these gangsters, because they did belong to a gang, the doctors told me there was more than a 98% chance that I had contracted some form of STD and HIV. Not all HIV, and HIV. And that in itself was another miracle that the doctors could not understand. They found no trace of anything. Not a trace of anything. The bruises and the beatings that the injuries I sustained during that period of time, they could not find the evidence that actually happened, to the point where they thought I was lying. Being kicked with steel-tip boots, that's gonna leave some marks for quite a while, beyond 2 weeks. The chokings, the kind of chokings that I endured, that would have left marks for weeks and weeks and if not months. They couldn't find it. But I knew what Jesus was doing. I never argued with anybody. They thought I was crazy. They thought I was lying. I never said anything. I just left it because I knew what Jesus did. And then we started walking back the way we came from. And as hard as I tried, I knew I could not look back. I tried to look back and I just could not. Now, when Jesus was swinging me around, that's when I saw his face. That's when I saw his face. And I felt bold enough to look at his face and to admire his beauty. And that's something that I hold on to. Oh, Laurie, if I do not do that on a daily basis, I would not survive. Would not survive. But he took me back, and as we got to the end of the beach, well, where we began, at the beginning of the beach, there were the saints: Abraham, Moses, Jacob, Isaac, Elijah, Mother Mary. Everybody's heads were bowed in prayer. And Mother Mary was the only one that raised her head, and she looked directly at me and smiled and said that her message to the world was and is, God always answers the prayer of a mother. And I began to understand after I was released that my mom, at 6 p.m. every evening since the day I was taken, she would light a white candle and pray for me to return safely every single evening. And every single evening around whatever time, because I had no clue of the time, I would feel this warmth on my body every single evening. And I always thought, oh, it's the injuries, it's whatever, starvation, whatever it is. When my mom told me that, I realized what it was. It was her prayer. But in heaven, when my mother Mary told me that, I realized God didn't only answer my prayer as a mother, He answered my mother's prayer. Because my mom didn't cry. See, my mom, she knew that I was coming back. And, my brother, other people would be like, is she okay? Is she, they were thinking she was becoming, she was going off, and she was like, no, no, I know. I know my baby's coming back. And that's faith. Not believing, knowing. So she is the most, people think I'm strong. It's one thing to have it happen to you, but when it's your child, I don't know how you would even like, I don't know. I don't know. My mom is. In any event, they,
Wow, Debbie. Wow.
yeah, I always kind of tear up my mom there.
Yeah.
But, Mother Mary's message was a very, very important part of what I do. When I work with women, when I counsel women, and don't realize, not just mothers, women, the power that we have within us over our families, over our children. As women, we have a special power that we do not tap into. And she smiled at me and she bowed her head. And man, I went on a hunt for that likeness of her. Because growing up in a Presbyterian church, you don't know, you see a particular image of Jesus. You don't even learn about Mother Mary except that she's the mother of Jesus. You don't learn about archangels and too much about the saints and so on. So I had no previous knowledge about these things. And I went looking for this picture of Mother. I couldn't find it anywhere. A couple years later, I had an appointment and I was just a little bit early and I was just killing some time in an old art shop. I'm walking around, just looking through stuff, just killing the time. And at the very back, this thing sticks out, this brown old frame. And I just pulled and I look, and there it was, the exact likeness of Mother Mary that I saw, which I had never seen before anywhere. I bought it immediately. I asked the store owner, where'd you get it? She had no clue. She found it was straight. She checked her inventory. It was never purchased. There's no signature. There's no, okay, so who painted this, whatever. No knowledge. How did it get there? You know, but before I returned to my body, um, Jesus told me, he said, continue on your journey. You are going to have a lot of difficulties, but you're going to have help. And on my left side, I can't explain the sound. The sound of Archangel Michael dropping on my left side. He just dropped like, boom, like something you'd see in a movie. And I heard his wings. I heard him pull his sword from from the sheath. And there was just this mighty, heavy, strong presence on my left side. He said, Michael will be there whenever you need him. He will protect you until your work is done. And then there was another on my right side, and that was the Archangel Gabriel. Now, I didn't learn much about these things in church. I heard about Gabriel bringing the message to Mary, oh, you're going to have a son. That's it. Full stop. And when we think angels, we think, these little airy fairy with feathery wings flying around, and they're not. They're not. And he or she drops on my right side. It says, if you need wisdom, understanding, or guidance, call on Gabriel. He will come immediately. And I tell you, over the years, I've felt those two around me very, very often. More so Michael. More so Michael. I refer to him as my buddy. And don't be confused. I do not pray to Mother Mary and I do not pray to Archangel Michael, but I do speak to them and they are around. And yeah, and I knew they were there and I knew they were always gonna be there with me. And I suddenly grew very, very tired. And I curled up on the sand in a little fetal position, just like a newborn baby, curled up like that. And I returned to my body. And I remember that gasp of that first breath, how painful it was and how horrible it was to be back in this thing after that kind of freedom. And the journey back, Lori, that's life. That's freedom. I could move at the speed of thought. I saw a space. I'll go there. And before I could even complete the thought, I'm there. And it was like I was floating and dancing and flying all at the same time, but with the speed of thought. And I knew I could go beyond any limit that I could even conceive of. I knew that time and space didn't even exist, and that there were different realms and different timelines. And I just knew all of this knowledge was just kind of coming at me. And I just knew so much. So when I came back to my body, it's not something you can explain to just anybody. You know, you had to have been there. And then I got sucked back into this thing, and now I'm here, and I did the book, and I'm continuing down the list, and until hopefully my time comes.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Debbie, that was a lot. So when you said that you saw the face of Jesus and you talked about Mother Mary, have you ever found a photograph or a
Oh, yeah.
likeness that reminds you of Jesus? And if so,
Oh, yeah.
will you share that with us?
It's everything is on my website. Because
Okay,
that's a question that I got asked the most.
I'm sure.
So as soon as I got my website up and running, that was my first blog, the image of Jesus and the image of Mother Mary. So it's on debbiealley.com. If
Okay.
you go to the first blog, I believe, it should be there. Um, there's this little girl named Akian, I think very well
Oh,
known.
yes. So many NDEers have said that her
That
picture is the one that matches.
that's the closest likeness to him I've ever seen.
Wow. Love that.
And I found one, it sits on one side of my bed, and the one of Mother Mary that I bought in the old art shop that sits on the other side. That's Jesus I know.
Wow. So I wanted to share the synchronicity with you, but you were in the middle of your experience and I didn't want to interrupt you. But you said these words. The one thing that I knew for sure was that I I think you said love Jesus or that you were loved by Jesus. And when you said that, I had run a timer so that I can do editing and my timer was at 444. Does that mean
You should say
anything to
that.
you?
Yes.
What
That
does that
that
mean?
always appears to me.
Are you
Four
serious?
four four or 114 or 1414 or
So the four
it's
is the
just the
significance.
fours and the
So you're
ones.
probably not even surprised.
The fours, the ones, and the threes. They always all the time.
How crazy is that? I love that. Okay, so there was that. Um, One of the things I was curious about, it's interesting. I feel like there's definitely a connection to the belief system that you have in this incarnation that sometimes translates with what you see on the other side. So you've talked a lot about God and you talked about Jesus and you were already religious. You said you were Presbyterian. But when you came back, there were all these other parts that weren't part of that Presbyterian upbringing, the archangels and the Mother Mary, and some of those are a little bit more Catholic. So I am curious because there are very specific tenets that belong to the Christian religion regarding Jesus about who goes to heaven. And I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are about that.
About who goes to heaven. You know what? I believe in the Bible. This is my belief. I cannot cannot speak for any other religious
Your audio
system.
is like super far away.
This helps. Is that any better?
Still kind of far away. I don't know what's happened to it. Say it
How
again.
about now?
Still the same. It was really super clear before, and all of a sudden it's like you're miles away. Okay, now it's back. Now it's back.
Back? Okay, good.
Back.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll just
So,
leave you off as you said, I believe in the Bible and this is my
well,
specific belief.
yeah, my specific belief, I believe the Bible. I believe that my experience largely was based on my belief system. But at the same time, there are a lot of things that occurred that I had no previous knowledge of. Um, so how does that fit into the grand scheme of things? I also believe that if anyone of any religion, or even an atheist, whatever, whoever, if you know you've led a life that is not moral or um, righteous, and you sincerely and genuinely repent, change your ways, that there is room for you in heaven, because there is forgiveness in God's heart for everyone. He created all of us in his likeness. And if he created the good, he also created the bad. But we are given free will. This is where the problem comes in. Well, problem comes in. We're given free will. We can make any number of good or bad choices. It's entirely up to us. But I personally believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
Okay, so
That's
then you
my
believe in like
belief.
you believe a hell for the people then that don't?
I believe a hell exists.
Hmm.
Um, I believe that hell is reserved for, now when I say hell, I mean a place of deep, 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 rich, filthy darkness. Not necessarily the hell that we imagine with flames and, all that kind of stuff that's portrayed. I believe that that place of darkness is reserved for people who have allowed darkness to infiltrate their lives. That I believe. And have made those conscious choices to go in that direction and not change their ways.
Okay, fair
That's
enough.
what I believe.
What about the archangels? Like you had this experience, you felt one drop on one side, you felt one drop on the other. Tell us a little bit about that and how they have continued to guide and protect you while
Mhm.
you've been back in this human incarnation.
Well, I'll tell you, Gabriel, I've called on a few times and asked for wisdom. And then when I say call on, like I speak out loud to them. And I've seen flashes of light where there is no light when I've had those conversations. But Michael has been the most prominent because I believe that when you're put on a course to uh, spread the word of God or um, share your light with the world, however you want to put it, right? That you become a moving target for darkness and obstacles. And I've often had to call on Michael. Sometimes I can sense a presence that's not of God. I know it's dark. I know it's evil. And I say, Michael, please intervene. Or I call on Jesus. And then there'd be flashes of light. Michael is not airy fairy, believe me. He is seriously badass. And he is a he. His body is armor. His wings are metallic. Everything is metallic and armored. And his sword, I've seen his sword. And when I was a little child, I would be attacked by nightmares a couple times a week. And I would be wielding this tiny little sword because I was a tiny little kid. I'd be wielding this sword that had the same gems. And I was only able to figure out what it was until I saw Michael's sword. And I realized, wait a minute, what was I doing with a miniature version of his sword? That was because I belonged to his army. So I don't pray to him. To me, he's like my buddy. He's like a friend. So if I need him, I'm like, Michael, do something. Like, dude, do something, act. And he does. He does. And I've had this particular experience where I was in a store, a bunch of people in the store, and I always, after my experience, I always kind of position myself in a way where I can have the widest view of what's happening. So if I need to escape, I can. And I was in that position. And this crazy guy, guess he was on drugs or something. He comes in and he's wielding this big stick at everyone. He was scaring everyone. A couple of people were screaming. The owners called the police. They were taking their merry time. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at this man and I'm not afraid. I didn't even say, "Oh, Michael," or Jesus or anything. I just stood there and I'm looking at him. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, so if he comes more this way, I'll just sneak out that way. Very logically, not afraid. And he's swinging the sword at a woman who's maybe about 2, 3 feet away from me. And then he stops, he looks at me, he points the sword, and then he goes like this. And then he looks at me and he bolts. And the funny thing was, just before I entered that store, I heard his wings. I used to hear his wings. I heard his wings go up, full metallic form. And when the man entered, I heard the sword just slickly kind of slide from the sheath. So I knew there was danger, but I wasn't afraid. And then as soon as the man left, the wings went down. And that was that. And I just walked out. And that was just one experience.
Wow. Well, you said that you've had a few really amazing experiences. So I would love you to share just one or two more that really are top of mind or, something
Mhm.
that you would like everybody to know about.
That was the most prominent one. Um, a lot of the times I would hear his wings, especially. Sometimes it would just be his sword. Sometimes I'd hear the entire sword, like, because I was able to discern dark energy from light energy before any of this even happened, but it just kind of like 2, 3.0 after that, after I was released. So if I would sense anything, whether I'm outdoors or in my home, but more so in my home, as soon as I pick up on something, I would hear his wings go up. And then I would pray. And after a little while, not pray to him, just pray in general. And after a little while, I'd hear his wings go down, like literally go down. I'd hear it audibly. Or I'd hear his sword. His entire sword would be unleashed sometimes if there is deep darkness. And that happened once or twice at a different house we were living at the time. I heard his entire sword come out, like he was okay, all out ready for, like, come at me, just try it. Like, just try it. And I knew he was not standing on my left, he was standing in front of me. And I've had people walk up to me. It's funny how after you've had these experiences, like-minded people are drawn to you. And I've had several times, a few people just walk up to me and be like, "You're that girl that got kidnapped." And I was like, mm-hmm. Because I started speaking out immediately after, right? So my face was kind of all over. And people recognized me, and I've had three three women walk up to me on different occasions, no knowledge of one another, and said, "Your left shoulder is warm, isn't it?" I'm like, hmm? And it always was warm. And I say, Yeah, yeah." I said, "You got an angel on your left side." And then I've had people walk up to me and say, "You're not supposed to be here." Like, what do you mean? "You're not supposed to be saying you're supposed to be dead." Weird, weird, weird. Some people I've never met in my life, just boom,
What do
walk
you
up to
think
me and
that
tell.
is, Debbie?
I think it's because they were able to see something, see the energy around me, see the light, see the angels, maybe even. But it was just very uncanny to me. I've had one person in particular say, um, the choke marks, the choke marks on my neck, that were on my neck because of all the beatings and all that. He said, "Those marks are gone." He said, "But nobody understands how they're gone." I said, "No, they don't understand how it's gone." I said, "Yeah, but I do." They were removed. I've had people tell me all kinds of things that they had no real way of knowing. they had no way of knowing, and this was before the book came out. So it's not as though they read the book and
Right.
got certain bits of it. This was before the book. The book took me about 3 years to just put together.
I can
It was
imagine.
really,
Oh my
really
goodness, to
difficult.
write that. Yeah, I
Oh,
really can't imagine.
that's terrible.
Well, Debbie, I am so grateful that you put aside your vulnerability, put aside the trauma that you have to relive every time you tell this story to be able to share this with the world, because I would imagine that you are bringing so many people so much hope, and to also know that if they've had a loved one that suffered, that the loved one leaves, they're protected, they're whole, that we can never truly be harmed. And I think there's a lot of comfort in that.
Oh yeah, there is. That's what it's about. It's bringing that sense of hope and comfort and peace, and especially in this time where this world has just gone to shreds. I think people are looking for that more than ever. And the counseling that I do, I mean, I've had tons of men that I counsel as well, but especially the women, people have been now, they've coming out because I had no one, Lori. There was no one for me to turn to for help. There was no one who could look me in the eyes and say, "Hey, I really, I understand." There was no one because that's such a taboo thing. You don't talk about it. You don't put it out there. I was probably the first one to do so, and I got such a bad rap for it. But I don't care. I'm doing what I was called to do. Um, and so I think I was put kind of like a bridge so that I can be the one there for other women to say, "Hey, I know," and then they feel that comfort that there is somebody else who actually knows. And
Right.
and so all of that I do, the counseling, the blogs. God willing, I'm gonna get my podcast out that started and up and running by the end of this month. The book is there. Other books are there and coming. Everything's on my website. So
And
those of you who feel
what
the
is your
need,
website? And I'll put the information down in the show notes for
yeah,
everyone.
it's Debbie Ali, exactly the way my name is spelled,
Okay.
DebbieAliEali.com. Everything is there. Contact, email, whatever it is. And I get
Wonderful.
responses all the time, women just reaching out, just stressed, troubled, men just need help.
I'm sure. That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for the vulnerability, for the candor, for what you're doing to help wake up the collective. It is definitely needed right now.
Yes, it is. Boy, is it. Thank you, Lori, for having me.
Yes, I'm so honored that I got a chance to be able to have this conversation. And I want to thank everybody so much for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.